Right, welcome. Welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jonathan Rial. I'm a GP. I'm a GP trainer and an Associate Dean in Wessex. And I am working for the college as the clinical lead for portfolio development. This afternoon, I'm just going to spend a bit of time just talking you through where we are with things at the moment. So how things are going. We've obviously been piloting the new portfolio in Wessex now for a couple of months. Things are going really well, but obviously the plan is to roll this out nationally later in the year. So really, this is an opportunity to give everyone else the option to see what it's about, to have a look at some of the slides that I've created, have a look through and ask any questions. So there is a question area there. If you're signed into YouTube, you'll be able to ask some questions, and there is a few people that will be able to hopefully type some answers to you, but also I will be able to have a look at the questions later and hopefully answer and maybe show you if you're looking if you want to look at a particular area. Okay, so let me just check where we are with everything. So I'm going to kick off now by going through a few slides which will just introduce a bit of the background behind all of this. Some of you may have seen these because they're already on the RCGP website. So what I'm going to do is just go through those, and then I'll do a bit of a live demo of the website and show you how things work on there. So obviously the college has been working with 14 Fish, who are the developers of the new portfolio. So a bit of a timeline. So 2006, around that time, the trainee portfolio was created. In 2011, there was a bit of a rehash, and it changed slightly, became a bit more modern with those sort of folders that you all recognise now. In 2016, work began on the workplace-based assessments, and that was under the leadership of Susan Boginer, who's a GP. And that took some years to develop, and then obviously went to the GMC, and thankfully was all accepted. In 2018, requirements for the new portfolio went in, and 2019 14 Fish were able to get the contract, and work began in around July of last year. As I've already mentioned, we went live in Wessex in February of this year, and it's been very successful. All the trainees, all the educational supervisors are very pleased with it, and it has reduced certainly some of the burden of the e-portfolio. So a little bit about the evolution. That's how it looks. Some of you may remember that many years ago, 2006, that one came in. This is what we are used to now, those big blue folders, and this is what it looks like in its current state. So quite different aesthetically, and I'll show you more again in a moment. So just going through some of the important things to mention. All of the data from the old, sort of the current trainee portfolio, will be moved across to the new one. So nothing's going to be lost. If you're halfway through an educational supervisor report, that will move across. If you're halfway through anything, it will just move across. So there has been a seamless sort of transfer of data. All of the log entries, all of the attachments will all come across. So there is some reassurance there, and obviously because we've piloted it in Wessex, we know that it's all working okay. When the trainees first log in, they will be concerned that a lot of their data is lost, because the view that they will see will be of this particular review period. So in the current trainee portfolio, you can see everything, but in the new system, you will just see the information at first glance on this review period, and that just allows trainees and educational supervisors just to see how the trainee is going in this review period, rather than getting the bigger picture. Okay, so the other thing to mention is that the website is dynamic. And what that means is it works seamlessly on any other devices. So if you open it up on your iPad or on your iPhone or other Android device, that means that it will adapt to the size and still feel completely native to that environment. So the old e-portfolio, if you tried to open it on an iPhone or a mobile device, you could only see part of it. It was really clunky, whereas this adapts perfectly. So this is what it will look like. So you can see on the big screen, you can see lots of information, and there's information side by side, whereas when you're looking at it on an iPhone, it just brings it into one line. But it's designed completely to work on all sort of resolutions, all designs, which is great. There is also an app. It's not quite been released yet. They're still just finishing off a few little things, but the way the app will work is it will work seamlessly online and offline, and whatever you do on either system will update the other. So if you are on the train using your iPhone on the app to do log entry, if you get halfway through and then you lose connection, you can keep typing. When it reconnects, it will transfer all the information, or you can do half a log entry and then finish it later on the on your computer when you get home. So it will work both ways, and it will work seamlessly online and offline. You can also use the website, as I said, on your iPhone whilst you're online, but you have to be online for that, whereas the app will work offline as well. And this is an example of how it works. So you'll still be able to tag capabilities, you'll still be able to add clinical experience groups even on the app. So something that didn't really work on the current sort of portfolio is messaging. It did exist, but people didn't tend to use it. But a lot of work has gone into making this as seamless as possible, because we understand how important it is to be able to message your trainee. So there is an inbuilt messaging service, and it's a bit of a conversation. It looks a little bit like WhatsApp or sort of text messaging. And that can be really useful for you to sort of organise meetings, to sort of prompt them to add assessments. And equally, if you're a trainee, you can be writing messages to your educational supervisor to ask for help on certain things, or to any questions really. The messaging service is not viewable by the ARCP or by anyone else. It's only between the two parties that are involved, which I think is really important. And this is sort of how it would look. So you can see if the message has been read, which again is important, and you can reply within that. Any messages that you get, you can either get an email to say you've got a message to go and read it, and it will take you to that site, or when you first sort of go to the landing page, the dashboard of the portfolio will say, look, you've got an unread message, here it is, and you can either mark to say you've read it, and you can reply. So a significant change is that we'll be gathering data for the educational supervisor's report as we go. So the log entries, the way that they work has changed slightly. So the trainees will be writing a little bit of background, and then they'll be specifically commenting on their how they've demonstrated the capabilities. So they will select the capabilities they think they have demonstrated, and then write some narrative to explain how they've done that. That information can then easily be attached to the educational supervisor's report as their evidence to build up the picture as they go. So the trainee can still, and the educational supervisor can still wait until the end when they're doing their ESR, but there is the opportunity to actually do this as they go, and I'll demo this in a moment. This is essentially how it looks. So you can see the trainees written in Latin, a brief description, and then they've chosen the making a diagnosis and decisions as the capability they think they've demonstrated, and then they write the narrative or the description underneath, and then add capability, and they can do that for up to 3 capabilities per log entry. So within the new portfolio, there are these lozenge areas where you can see, if you're a trainee or if you're an educational supervisor, how many of the capabilities or the clinical experience groups the trainee has demonstrated within this review period. And this is really helpful as a quick visual guide to say, okay, what areas have I not covered? What areas do I need to cover? What areas do I need more work on, basically? So it's just a really quick and easy, simple aid to just see how the trainee is going, and if you're the trainee, to see how you're doing. So this is how it looks. You can see the capabilities, you can see the clinical experience groups. 2 different colours here. So grey means that the trainee has suggested that capability for a particular log entry, and when they've started to use that particular piece of evidence for the educational supervisor report, it goes green. So the idea is over a review period, say it's a 6-month review period, those grey lozenges will slowly build up in each of the capability areas. And when the trainee's got three lozenges which are grey in each of the capability areas, you know that they've got a good picture of evidence. Now these are only the log entries. The assessments don't count towards these because often they are sort of mandated. Then the trainee will start creating their self-rating, and they'll start adding those pieces of evidence within their ESR, and each of those lozenges will turn green. So when the trainee asks you to do the self-rating, when they've done, your educational supervisor's sort of part, if they've got 3 lozenges in each of the capabilities, you know that they've added sufficient amount of evidence. There's also a search functionality, which is a bit sort of more detailed than the old ePortfolio, and that allows you to find particular log entries very easily, to sort of filter particular areas. And everything in the portfolio is found under a particular area called all entries, and it's important that you sort of know that, because some trainees have been struggling to find all of their entries. But I'll show you in a little moment when we go live that there is an area called all entries, and that is where you'll find every single log entry, every single assessment, every single piece of information will be in there, and you can filter it as you need to. And these are sort of some of the examples of the filters. Some new ones may be appearing on there, but at the moment these are the filters that you've got. So assessments, historically assessments have been very much standalone. So you'd have a CBD, a mini CX, a COT, and you can go in and you can look at how that trainee has done in that particular assessment. But the new system allows you to look at those assessments over a period of time. So you can look to see whether the trainee has been improving, or if you are the trainee, whether you're improving, or whether there are some areas which are just flatlining within assessments that you need to maybe a bit more focus on. So it just gives you a bit of a representation of assessments over time. Here's an example of the different parts of the assessment, and then over a period of time how the trainee is doing. And we can also toggle a graph view for this as well. So if you want it to see it as a graph, we can add that too. So the PDP is changing as well. Instead of being a general PDP throughout the whole of GP training and a whole long list, the PDP is going to be attached to a review period. So let's assume a review period is 6 months long. The trainee will set some objectives at the beginning, and then as they go along, they'll add a few more objectives potentially. But the idea is that at the end of that review period, so when they get to their ESR, they'll review all the PDPs that they've got, that they've created within that review period, and then decide whether they've A, completed them, in which case here is the evidence, B, they haven't had an opportunity to complete them yet, but they still want it as a PDP, and they'll move it forwards into the next review, or C, the final option is they haven't completed it and they never will, and the reason is because XXX. So it just means that the PDP is just a bit more neat. It doesn't have a long list, but it's also nice and accessible and viewable by the trainee, because it's easily viewable on that main screen. And again, I'll be demoing that in a second. Something that often comes up is how many assessments do I need to do in each review period, but also over the sort of the total of training. And the new portfolio will allow us to demonstrate that, so the trainee knows how they're going. And this will be based on the length of the review period, but also whether the trainee is less than full-time or is full-time. So obviously if they're working less than full-time, the requirements in that review period are going to be less than someone that's working full-time. So it is dynamic in that sense. Obviously with the COVID stuff going on, then some of those figures are going to be out of the window, but as things stand, it's in there, and obviously it will be live and be switched on at certain times. So you can see there are numbers there, and it's saying how many they need per post or per year, and then the total. And the same applies to the assessments, so how many assessments they need in each area and in total and throughout the whole of training. So obviously this is just an example, but as the RCGP, if they change the requirements, obviously we can change that on the portfolio as well. So there's also some graphs on there, and they're just really helpful to show how, again, a trainee is covering all of the areas. So if they're doing too much focus on clinical management and not enough on some of the other areas, it'll become obvious, because these graphs are really sort of helpful to show how they're doing. And these are the examples. So you can see on the left they've got the capabilities, and each of them you can click on. So you can see there are 6 for fitness to practice. If you then clicked on that particular area, it would open up those logs where they've demonstrated fitness to practice. So you can use this for navigation, but also you can use it as an indicator of how the trainee's going. Same with the clinical experience groups. Attachments was always a really big issue in the current ePortfolio. I think there was 10 megabytes initially. I think it's been up to 50 megabytes of late, but still the trainees were struggling with that space, certainly when they're attaching out of hours evidence, etc. On the new portfolio, there will be no limitation. There is a slight limitation on the size of a particular file, so I think it's 15 megabytes. But other than that, they can attach as many as they wish to their logs, which will be really helpful. So you can see here they've attached a file which is 14 megabytes, and they'll never be told that there's too much. MSFs and PSQs look quite different. The outputs are going to be much easier to sort of understand, and also so the outputs are going to be much easier to understand and be hopefully more helpful. Each of the MSF and PSQ questions that are answered are linked to specific capabilities that they're asking about. It's not a bit of a catch-all as the current system is. But also the trainee has the opportunity to chase up unanswered MSF queries, and they can also see how many responses they've got back. And the system will know whether these responses are from clinicians or non-clinicians, so that they can make sure they've got enough. And they'll know, when they've got enough, they'll close it. So it should allow the trainee to have a bit more control over the MSFs as well. Yes, so I've already explained they'll be linked to the particular areas within the ESR, and the outputs should be much more helpful. So here's an example of what it will look like. You've got the questions, the gradings on the left, and then you've got a graph as well to sort of indicate a percentage to say how that is a percentage of the total score, which again is quite a good helpful indicator. And then any free text comments are there as well. The little triangle next to the grading is actually we're asking trainees to self-rate themselves for the MSF and the PSQ questions beforehand, so we just get an idea of where they think they might be compared to where they actually are perceived to be by others. So that's quite helpful as well. It's also a GMC requirement, which is why we've brought that in. But you'll certainly see that there is a difference with the MSF and the PSQs. The PSQ questions have also changed slightly. It's a bit shorter. There's only 9 questions. So it fits nicely onto one page, and the PSQ questions can be collated by sending patients a link to a website to complete at home. You can print out a form for them, or you can have it live on a screen within the surgery and they can just press on the answers. Now using AccuRx, you could text the patient a link to the PSQ, and again they can then do that really, really easily. And it only takes them a few minutes. There's also the option for free text entry there as well, which is great. Okay, so there's a bit of artificial intelligence built in as well, which is very clever. So if a trainee writes a log entry and they mention a particular, so a name of either a patient or a colleague, it will just highlight it to say you've used a particular name. Do you want to review that? It's not going to change it, it's not going to delete it, but it's going to highlight it for them. And this is contextual. So if I give you an example, so Brook, it's come up with, it says the trainees used detected Brook. Now Brook obviously could be a little river, but it's also a name. So if you'd said, we sat by a brook, then it's not going to highlight it. But if you said, I saw a patient called Brooke, it will do. So it's not a fail-safe, but it's just there as a sort of to highlight and to hopefully guide the trainee. Dictation. So this is a really sort of big positive. It does easily allow you to dictate into it, and that's using your native software. So if you're using an iPhone, it's going to be Siri. If it's Android, it's going to be whatever they use for speech recognition. But we found since piloting, a lot of trainees are narrating their log entries. So essentially, if you open up your iPhone, you go into a clinical case review, you click on the box you want to speak in, and then just press the microphone and just speak as you normally would. It will then recognize your voice and turn it into text. And it seems to be incredibly accurate nowadays, and just seems to be working really sort of seamlessly. So when I've been reviewing my trainees' log entries and I've been adding evidence, I've been speaking into my phone, and it seems to be working really, really well. And that just saves a lot of time. Depends how quickly you can talk, obviously, but and how quickly you can type, but it seems to be working really well for me. And certainly a big plus. So that's the end of the slideshow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go over to the browser and just really have a little look around so you can see. So I'm currently logged in as a trainee. So let me just go back to the dashboard. So when someone logs in, a trainee logs in, they will see this page basically. Down here at the bottom right behind my picture is a little help, and so if you've got any queries or concerns at any point, click that button. It will open up a window and you can start asking questions in there. It may know the answer, but if it doesn't, then you can contact us and it will send a message to 14 Fish, and they will get back to you hopefully pretty quickly with an answer, and they have been very responsive. At the moment, we've got some information banner just on the COVID guidance. Obviously that will disappear once that's all settled down. Then straight away, you've got the opportunity to write a learning log. And so you can go straight in there, start typing or start speaking, and it will start filling in that information and record a learning log. That will go into a clinical case review area, and then you can start adding to it later if you wish to, but it just allows you to go straight in there and start doing it. You can see on here that I've got an unread message, and I can go into that message and mark it as read. I can send a response. So again, this is the sort of message area where messages will come up. There are also some comments. So my educational supervisor has written some comments to some log entries below. And again, I can see that they've read those comments. I can go in and just mark that I've seen them and read them. So again, we just know that as a trainee that you know you're reading all the right areas and that you've seen everything. And as an educational supervisor, you know the trainees are reading your comments, which obviously is an important aspect of it. You can also set yourself some sort of goals for learning log entries, and you can edit the date of when this started, and it will just tell you how many log entries you've done since then. This is what I talked about by searching for all entries, and in there you'll literally find everything that you've ever recorded within the portfolio. And again, the opportunity to sort of record learning is there. Okay, right, so once we go in to the portfolio, you will see that, again, we've just got the COVID information at the top. That will go once things have hopefully settled down. Then we've got the pages split up into different areas. So the top area are the learning log areas, and you can see the different types of learning log that the trainee will have to engage with, and the number of entries in this review period that the trainee has engaged with. And if there are any unread comments that you need to look at, they will be flagged up here. Below that is the ESR preparation area. And so this is where we've got the lozenges, which I spoke about. And as you can see, as you hover over these, it tells you which capability we're referring to, and the same with the clinical experience groups. So you can see this particular trainee making in diagnosis and decisions. There's no entries so far, so that might be an area I focus on, but I've got lots of clinical examination procedural skills demonstration, so I may not need to focus so much on there. So again, it's just quite an easy sort of visual representation. I'll come back to the other bit. So moving down to the next area is the educational assessments area. So again, these are the assessments that the trainees can do, the number of entries that they've completed within this review period. And then down at the bottom here, we have an area called the compliance passport. So this is where we keep sort of mandatory evidence and learning. And so this is where we might add our safeguarding children certificates, safeguarding adults, basic life support, and then Form Rs can be attached here as well, so that it can easily be seen by the deanery staff, etc. So coming back up here, we've got all entries, and if I click on that, as I say, this brings up a list of all the entries, all the assessments that have ever been done, and you can go into each of those. You can also filter by type of entry, so learning logs, clinical experience groups, you can just filter by those, etc., or you can just type a word and find it. So you'll be able to find whatever you're looking for. You can also export this if you wish to. Underneath that, we've got some sort of demographic information. So the review period, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit just to make it a bit more clear. Here we are. So over here we've got the review period, which is the sort of the period of time that you're looking at. The training year, which the trainee is in at the moment, the deanery, which it will be set to the deanery the trainee's in, who the supervisor is, the current post, which will say whatever clinical post they're doing, and also underneath this, although it's not set, there would be an ARCP date set so that the trainee and the educational supervisor know when the next ARCP is. This is the messaging area, which again I spoke about, which is just within this area too. And then the PDP, so right on that front page, it's really obvious the PDPs are, and so it helpfully will remind the trainees of the areas that they need to look at. So you can go into each of these individually and get a bit more information. So joint injections, learn how to do them, target date. So have you completed this goal? Yes or no? And then reflect. So if you click yes, then obviously this is how I did it. And you might say, see learning log entry dated. If you click no, would you like to carry this over to your current PDP? So that's the sort of the next review period, yes or no, and then describe some areas there. So hopefully this will just encourage the trainees to engage with their PDP and use it, as a useful thing rather than it just being a list of things they look at just before their educational supervisor's report. Below that, we've got the exams. I haven't taken the exams recently, so they're not on there. But that will show the exam if it's booked, and if it's booked, what date it's booked for, if it's been taken, the scores, and whether it's sort of a pass or an unsuccessful. And that's the same for both AKT and CSA. The outputs are the same as the current e-portfolio, so the scores that you get and the split between the different areas is the same. Visually it looks slightly different, but it's still very, it's very helpful. So I can't show you that today, but I can do in due course. Underneath here, we've got, this is where the feedback area is. So we've got Colleague 360, which is your MSF or the patient feedback. And you can go in and you can start collecting that very easily. So Colleague 360, you would enter the information in and add them, and it would slowly build them up. And here you can see whether they're clinical or non-clinical. And if you're not sure what things are, you can press the question mark or hover over the question mark, and it will come up. And the same with the PSQ. So you can add, you can print the questionnaire, or you can send the trainees a link through AccuRx or through email, or you can send them an email directly. Underneath the MSF and feedback area is the educator notes, and that's the same as the current educator note works. Trainees get notifications now when there's an educator note, whereas before they didn't. So that just allows for the trainee to see it as well. So those are the kind of main areas of the portfolio. I'm going to go into a few specific areas just to show you a bit more information. So back to the learning log entry, I talked about these graphs, and if you click on spread of entries, it brings up these clinical experience groups and capabilities. And as you can see, as you highlight over them, it will sort of show you a percentage of how the trainee is doing, and the tables underneath do exactly the same thing. So you can see, you can also look at this for particular different review periods or particular types. So if you just want to look for clinical case reviews, how you're doing, you can filter it. In the clinical case review, so if I go in for each of these different log entries, sorry, I'll just go into another one for instance, you can see what is supporting documentation. If you click on that, it will open up what this type of log entry is. You won't be able to read that now on the screen, I appreciate, but it just gives the trainee and the educational supervisor a bit more information. The same applies for all of these. So what is a clinical case review, and it will bring it up. And for the assessments, COTS, for instance, what is a COT assessment? And then a frequently asked questions are there as well, so a bit more information. So each of these areas has helpful hints and tips to show you what you need to do, how you do it, and links to information from the workplace-based assessment page and from the college. Going back to the assessments, if I just click on scores over time, this is what I talked about. Now this is obviously a fake trainee, so it's not going to show us much. I don't think I've got many assessments in there, but you would understand the concept that if there was another assessment, it would be written next to it and you'd be able to compare over a period of time rather than just getting a one-off assessment. And as I said, you can toggle that to a graph. Obviously it's a flat graph because I've only got one result in there. Let me see if I've got any more in CBDs. No, just one CBD as well. Okay, but that will be in that area there. Okay, I'm going to go back into the case reviews and show you a little bit about writing log entries and how we attach those to the assessment. So a new clinical case review, the trainee would open it, write a title, they would put the date, the sort of setting as usual, and then a brief description. So what happened, but not in huge detail. We don't need swathes of information. We don't need PO2s and all that kind of stuff. We just need, this is the background. Moving down, trainee would choose the clinical experience groups, and again they can choose a couple of those. And then we get down to the capability area. So the trainee would decide what capabilities they think they've demonstrated in this case. So if we do fitness to practice, the trainee would then write their justification. So describe how your actions and approach link to this capability. So then they would write how they've demonstrated fitness to practice within this sort of area. And if we're not sure how or they want the word descriptors, you just press this plus and the fitness to practice word descriptors will pop up straight away. So trainee and educational supervisor can see those. And when they've done that one, they can add a further one. And again, if you're doing communication, again, the word descriptor will change. So you would add capability. That would then appear. If the trainee changes their mind, they can get rid of it, or they can add another one, as I've shown here. So once they've added their capabilities, they feel like they've done a good job of this log, they need to move down to this reflection area, which is really important. What will they maintain, improve, or stop? And this is where they can become a bit reflective about what they've achieved from this, and if any learning needs have been identified from this event. So as you can see, the logs have changed, the way that they look have changed, the way that they're no longer sort of using the classical Gibbs reflective cycle. There is more of a focus on the capabilities, but that will making the educational supervisors report much easier and much quicker. You'll see there's an area here called private notes. So this is where a trainee can write something that they don't want anyone else to see. It's unlikely they'll do that necessarily, but what also goes in there is if an educational supervisor, for instance, when they're looking at this, they can see that I've written communication and consultation skills, and this is my explanation for it, which doesn't really demonstrate communication skills. What we don't want is the trainee to write lots of narrative and then the educational supervisor to say, well, that doesn't demonstrate that. Press the delete box, and then all of that effort is gone. So what will happen is it will unlink it to that capability, but the text will be down here. So the trainee can reuse it, rehash it, and then add it again as a different capability or the same capability once they've reworded it. So it just allows for us to not lose information. Also, if a trainee emails in, so if they email learning@14fish.com, then the text within that email will appear in private notes, and then the trainee can decide where they want to attach that information. So because it may be a capability, it may be a bit of brief description, so it just allows us to sort of catch it in there and then move it where they want to move it to. And then underneath is obviously this opportunity to attach files. Oh, it's 20 megabytes, not 15, even better. So they can attach files there and then click save. Once they've done that, they can then say they want to. It's not going to let me, I think, yet. Okay, so then we get to this page where we can share it with our educational supervisor, or we can link it to a PDP, or we can add it to compliance passport, create, etc. So there's lots of options once they've sort of saved it, and they can go in and edit it as well should they wish to, until it's been locked by requested a review by the educational supervisor. Okay, so that is how you would add a log entry. I just want to go in and show you how we'd use the ESR. So this is me doing a sort of a demo case. So this is the brief description, this is the reflective bits, and then this is the capability, so communication and consultation skills. This is the bit that I wrote. I spent some time using stepwise approach, blah, blah, blah. That's the stuff that's come up. The educational supervisor has gone in and they've written some evidence as well to sort of towards communication and consultation skills. So then when we get to do when we go and start doing the rating in the prepare for the ESR, we go into this region here and it's telling us we need to rate all the capabilities and add at least 3 sort of action plans. But if I go into communication and consultation skills, at the moment you can see this is the, let me just zoom in actually, because again it's quite small. So communication and consultation skills, this is the trainee rating they've given them. The educational supervisor's grading will come up here. This is the number of learning logs the trainee has done within this review period which demonstrate communication and consultation skills. This is the number that they've attached within the self-rating, so the educational supervisor report. So far 0. This is the number of assessments the trainee's done which demonstrate communication and consultation skills. So if we go to communication and consultation skills, this is where the trainee would choose their grading for themselves, so meets above expectations. And this is where they classically would write their evidence to demonstrate that capability. So I would write, I've demonstrated in log entry, blah, 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 and then I would tag it. So word descriptors there if you want to use them. Instead of writing lots and repeating what you've already done, all the evidence from the log entries are down here. So when you tag them, they will then auto-populate. So this particular case, breaking bad news, if I click on this icon, it will open that log entry. But this is my justification for demonstrating communication skills, which I wrote when I wrote a log entry and I tagged communication skills. So I spent some time using stepwise approach. If I then click this button here, include as evidence, within my self-rating, it's now date stamped and the evidence for demonstrating communication skills is there. So it's sort of populated that area for me. I can then go down and I could add another piece of evidence. So these are some of the assessments and how they might look. Let me find another one. So during this consultation, I used a drawing. So if I click include as evidence, and again, it will date stamp it and add that evidence. So you can see a trainee and an educational supervisor can quite quickly build up an educational supervisor's report. As you can see, this bit has just pulled in the bit from the trainee wrote, because I am the trainee, I'm doing my trainee rating. The educational supervisor, when they do it, will just bring in the bit that they wrote. So it just avoids someone submitting someone else's information. And the trainee can then save this or save as finished. If they click save as finished, it comes up with the icon on the desktop as this, and that means that indicates to the educational supervisor that they feel that they've gathered enough information for that particular area, and then the educational supervisor can start creating the evidence for that particular capability, rather than having to wait till they're all done and then doing it all in one go. So we can do it as they go. The ES can also unlock this if they think that the trainee hasn't provided enough evidence. They can unlock it and the trainee can add more. So again, you could use the messaging service to say, look, I've actually unlocked it because you've only added 2 pieces of evidence. We really would like 3, thank you. So it does allow that as well. So the trainee will then add the 3 pieces of evidence for each of the capabilities. They would create some action plans. They would review their PDP and then reflect on that. They've got their declarations that they need to sign. And that is basically building up the ESR. What I will do quickly is I'm just going to have a quick look at the questions, and then I'm going to show you the view from the Educational Supervisor's report. It looks very similar, but just so you've got an idea. So let's see if we can get some of these questions up. New e-portfolio, we're hoping it'll be later this year. Obviously, the coronavirus has affected things, but we're still hoping to be on target for the second half of this year. So just reading about the posts. So is there an area for sort of the posts that the trainee is going to take? Yes. So in answer to your question, Chris, there is an area. So it's not really visible because this is a bit of a demo account, but in this area you will be able to see the review periods and the years of training and the posts that the trainee has had. We've been working on a new view, which actually is a sort of pictorial view of the years, and then the posts within that, and then when they've had ESRs and ARCPs, etc. But that's still work in progress, but that will be coming, and I'll be doing more webinars looking at that area in due course. But the idea is it will have built-in date calculators, so it can calculate sort of proposed CCT dates if the trainee has less than full time, etc. But also we've already got some built-in calculators which is going to help the trainee know the number of assessments. So actually I didn't show that. If you click on requirements, you'll be able to see it's worked out that this review period is 163 days. And then it does some calculations based on the training, whether they're working full-time or part-time, and then in which year of training that is. So it will work out how many assessments you need. So in the ST1, in the current review, and then total, and the same for the assessments. So it's already got a bit of a calculator built in, so that just shows you that area. So cost-wise, it's included in your RCGP membership if you're a trainee. If you're a trainer, it's included because you're a trainer. So Alan's asked, with the COVID crisis, has anyone considered delaying the start of the new portfolio? Yes, so we have been looking at into delaying it, whether that's going to be of benefit or not. We've obviously been liaising with the deans, with educational sort of leads within the areas, and looked at all different options as to whether we delay it or not. And no final decision has been made, but we do feel it's pretty user-friendly and actually could be picked up pretty well, and we would be disappointed to delay it because once you start August with new trainees to be on the old system and then have to transition, it's more helpful to start afresh. But we don't know yet the final date. We do need to be getting confirmation from the deaneries and getting their opinion first, so we can't put a firm date on it. So Chris, yeah, so you've asked again about the posts. As I said, we've done a really helpful area within the ARCP area, and I am going to demonstrate ARCPs on another webinar, as well as the infrastructure, the background with all the posts, etc. on there at another date. There unfortunately isn't going to be a demo version that you can practice on. I know everyone wants that and everyone's seen that, but the logistics of doing that have been almost impossible. But what we can say is that I think a trainee as an educational supervisor, you'll be able to go straight onto this really, really easily and pick it up without too much bother. It's very difficult to do anything too wrong, and things are easily undoable should anything happen that you don't want to do. But it is very sort of intuitive, we found, and we've tried this we've been engaging with trainees throughout the whole time, with educational supervisors, with trainers, with ARCP teams, so everyone has been involved, and we've done lots of sit down sessions at the college with all these stakeholders involved to make sure that it's user friendly for everyone. So Alison says it until yeah, so we can completely change the minimum requirements for the assessments because of the COVID situation. In fact, we normally it would come up with a red flag when you're trying to go from one year to another and you haven't done enough assessments, but we've switched that off for the time being. But we can switch it back on, we can change the numbers, we can completely adapt to whatever's required depending on the situation. Okay, so those are those questions for now, but feel free to ask some more because I can always come back to them in a moment. So I'm going to go now to the Educational Supervisors Review, which looks very similar when you go in. On that front page, you'll see that these are the entries to review. So again, if you've got a trainee, if you're an educational supervisor with several trainees, you can go in and you can see that there are logs to review, and that will have all of your trainees' logs, not just one of them. So you don't have to keep going in and out. You can just go to your entries for review, and it will give you a long list. You can start doing one. Once you've done that one, it'll say, do you want to go to the next one? So you just click review all. You can just go through them one at a time, and it will just go from trainee to trainee, which would just make it very much easier to look at. In here, you can go to the supervisors area, and this is where you'll be able to see all of your trainees, again, where they are, and whether you want to toggle email preferences on or off. So if my trainee writes a log entry and asks me to review it, I will get an email, but I can switch that off if I'm getting too many emails. So then if I go into the particular trainees, so you'll see your trainees here. So if I go into the trainee, the view will look the same, so I can see how many entries they've done. I can see how they're doing with these graphs, and the same with their assessments. When I'm preparing for the ESR, the same sort of stuff will come up. I'll have to make sure that I can grade it. And again, if I just give you an example, if I go into communication skills, I go down to that log entry about breaking bad news. When I include the evidence, it's going to include my justification, not theirs. So if I click that, it will add it up here. And then I'll choose my grading as well. The trainees locked clinical experience and procedural skills, so they think they've done everything they need to. If I disagree, I can unlock for the trainee just up here and then send them a little message to say I've unlocked it, please keep going. And these are some areas, so quality of evidence we can reflect on. We can look at the action plans and the PDPs. But then when you actually get to sit down with your trainee and do it, you go into it would say start ESR. And this is where, again, this is like the last page of the current TEP, where you just add a few little extra bits, any revalidation concerns. So no, if yes, it's going to open up some stuff, whether it's resolved or unresolved. And then your recommendation and your comments, and then click save. And then that will then be, the trainee will then get a notification to say you've had an ESR, do you want to make any comments? And the ARCP will be able to view it, etc. So that's how you'd sort of submit it. Other than that, it looks very similar to the trainees view. Again, messaging here. Assessments wise, as an educational supervisor, I can go in and do an assessment anytime, the same as normal. So again, these look possibly slightly different to what you're used to. The layout is certainly different. You can select clinical experience groups for this. Then it talks about the gradings and how they look, and it splits it into different areas. And then for each one, it will tell you a bit more information of what we're looking for, and then feedback and submit. Just thinking if any of these look any different. So again, it looks, the layout is different, but what the stuff we're looking at the moment is the same. The other thing that has changed is if I'm a trainee and I want to request an assessment, so say I want to request a mini CEX, I'd go in here, request mini CEX. I then have my contact list, so these are people that I've asked to do assessments before, so I can say, oh look, I'd like you to do, say, their consultant, their educational supervisor, their clinical supervisor. I would like you to do a mini CX. So you just have to tick their address. If you've not used them before, you would enter their information in this box here. You could add a personal message. So please, can you complete a mini CX for me? Descriptive title for that mini CX. But this is the new part. So brief description of the case. So whatever the trainee writes in there will then be added to the assessment that the clinical supervisor will be looking at. The clinical supervisor can change it and add stuff to it, but it will be a really good reminder, because sometimes trainees complain that they've asked the registrar to do an assessment, and when they've gone in to do it, they've just written, 64-year-old man, and there's no background to what this case is about. So this allows the trainee to do that. And the clinical supervisor can obviously elaborate should they wish, but I think that should be really helpful. The trainees can also see the assessments that they've requested, what's happening, so you can see it's sent, and they can also see whether it's been completed or not, and they can send reminders if it hasn't been done. So they'll be able to sort of see their requests, etc., which I think should add a lot to it. So really, that's how it looks. Let me just go back and see if we've got any more questions coming in. We'll be able to see the entries to see as clinical supervisors, as is usually the clinical supervisor that reviews all the entries, and the ES only reviews a few. Okay, interesting. So in some areas, the clinical supervisor obviously looks at the reviews. In my particular area in Wessex, it's the educational supervisor that will read all the log entries. So for each post, the trainee can have an educational supervisor and extra clinical supervisors, and the roles will be the same. So the clinical supervisor can still go in and do assessments. They can go in, they can read log entries, and they can attach capabilities. The only thing they cannot do is do the ESR preparation. So Hannah, they will be able to do that, absolutely. They'll be able to go in and add information and look at log entries. So in the absence of any further questions, I don't think we've got any more that have come in. That is a sort of brief walkthrough of the portfolio, and I'll be doing this in more detail over the next coming months. I'll be sort of spending a bit more time and looking at particular areas, and maybe walking through ESR preparation in a bit more detail, if that's a requirement. I'm also going to do another webinar at some point soon where we're looking at the other aspect of the portfolio, which is the back end, which is the administrators, the program directors, the associate deans, the ARCPs area, which looks different to this. Is more powerful. It's got search functionalities. It allows you to book every single trainee into an ARCP date, so that you have a good sort of an idea that makes sure that every trainee has got an ARCP booked in, and you do the ARCPs within the system. I've been doing the ARCPs using the system. It's just revolutionary. And the same with the educational supervisors reports. We've been doing these. They're just so much easier when you get to it. Instead of holding your head in your hands thinking this is going to be 6 hours per trainee, you can do it very, very easily. And the idea is putting the onus back onto the trainee to gather that evidence as best they can, and you're really just there to ratify it and just check that everything's in there. But there's lots of fail-safes in the system to remind them what they need to do when, etc. So I'm really hopeful, and we have found that this has been a sort of significant improvement to the trainees' learning and development. So if you do have any questions, feel free to add them to the chat, and I will make sure that I answer them another time. Probably it might be worth subscribing to the 14 Fish YouTube thing, because that's where I'll be advertising when I'm going to be talking about the back end of it. So the what we call fish base, which is where we do the ARCPs and the PD stuff. So if you subscribe, you'll get a notification of that when it's happening. But if you do have any questions, then I'm sure you could find my email somewhere. It's jonathan.rial@he.nhs.uk, or you can leave it on the chat here, a question, and I'll try and answer it at another point. But thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and stay well, stay safe, and thanks for watching.